Good afternoon to all of you. I welcome all of you for today's webinar on post-COVID-19 care, a physiotherapy perspective. So I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor to give the opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Sir, unmute put please, sir. Sir, mute ಆಗಿದೆ.
Unmute.
Yes, sir.
Very good afternoon. RGHS and Echo India online training education for COVID-19 awareness program. Today's topic, the post-COVID-19 care, a physiotherapy perspective. The speaker, our Dean, Allied Health Science, Dr. Savita Ravindra Madam, and it's a very good topic for the current post-COVID, this trend. A lot of after COVID, lot of other problems are arising, and really it requires a rehabilitation for post-COVID care. And there are so many the complications after recovering from COVID. Lot of so many other complications, and it is the I think is the order of the day, and is a very good topic, and it'll be a game changer for our for this type of cases, and it's a very informative, ma'am. And please carry on.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Over to you, madam.
Yes, I'll just screen share and okay, just a minute. Just a minute, I'm just screen share. Yeah. Gautam, is it okay?
Yes, madam.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. And I'd like to thank the Vice Chancellor and all the committee members for the Echo India initiative, and for us at Physiotherapy to share among ourselves, as well as the others who are on board, to look at a physiotherapy perspective in the post-COVID care. And I'd like to also share with you what's currently available in the domain of rehabilitation and physical therapy practice. But beyond that, to share with you our own personal experience of running post-COVID rehabilitation from September 2020, and what are our learning experiences in this area. So the objectives of today's presentation is, I was looking at what does post-COVID situation have as an implications to clinical practice in physical therapy? How do we assess, or what has literature and evidence told us that we should and could assess of the clinical presentation that gets identified in post-COVID? What are the available evidence-based assessment guidelines that will support us, help us, and direct us to go forward? What are the developing practice strategies that are relevant with all its precautions in rehabilitation? And finally, what is the take-home message that we can share and go forward with at the end of today's sharing of my presentation with you? So I'm beginning with just looking at the implications of clinical practice. And here I'm very specifically saying from a perspective of physiotherapy as well as rehabilitation, and trying to link at some of the pathologies that we might see and that have an implication to the way we move forward in our clinical practice. So at this point in time, evidence from a physical therapy practice perspective is developing, and there's been a reasonable amount in literature. It is also evolving around the world, and there is a reasonable amount of Indian evidence also available from physical therapy practitioners around India. And there are pockets where you see far more work coming out into public domain. And more than anything else, we constantly need to look at literature because it's getting updated so quickly that within the area of our practice that looks at functional limitations in a post-COVID era or session is very critical for us to keep abreast and look at what's happening currently. Why is it necessary to constantly try to look at implications to clinical practice? Because it helps us to integrate into the clinical practice. The clinical practice verticals will need now more than any other point in time for all verticals that need to merge. It is post-COVID care is not about orthopedic rehab. It is not about cardiac rehab. It's not only pulmonary rehab. It's not about functional rehab. It's a combination of all of them. You cannot turn around and say, I am an orthopedic expert, so I will do only this part of the rehab, but the patient is presenting with multiple scenarios. Either you have groups practicing together as a team practice, or you've got to imbibe now more than any other time all of those domains so that you can manage to treat this patient as a whole. Some of the evolving features that we saw in practice in COVID, in post-COVID rehab is there are many, but the ones that affect and have implications on functional limitations are, number one, a lot of people present with tachycardia. And so what should you do with physical activity? How much can you exercise? What are the precautions you need to do? There are people who, a lot of people who, because of an autonomic system involvement or dysfunction, present with hypotension. So then in these people, what do? Can you exercise them the same as everybody else? What is commonly known as, yes, lungs are affected, so you have breathing exercise, you have pulmonary rehabilitation. But no, that's just not it. Therefore, it's far more than only the pulmonary system. And so therefore, restricting ourselves to this domain will be doing injustice to the patient. The most common post-COVID, post-acute care in clinical manifestations that impacts physical therapy practice is, number one, fatigue. Because when you have fatigue, and it can also come as you can also see it precipitated as that when they do any bouts of physical activity or post-exercise, you may see them in post-exertional symptom exacerbation, and that often comes because an inherent fatigue. It is an extensively discussed topic, still being discussed, what could be the multiple factorial involvement of the systems that cause fatigue, but it's definitely going to impact our practice in the way we put exercise together. One of the strongest things that we are seeing is there is an impairment of strength, especially of the lower limb in relation to the upper limb. One of the reasons given for this is the sarcopenia. It's not just people who were in the ICU. We are seeing it even with people who had a moderate illness. and patients are presenting with loss of muscle mass. There's a lot of work coming out from the West where they're looking at the quadriceps as one large muscle, where they're looking at ultrasonography to see muscle mass. And there definitely is very clear evidence that strength is compromised in a post-COVID season. Definitely because of the involvement of the respiratory system and beyond, we're also seeing issues on endurance. And so therefore functional capacities are getting affected. This can present with us patients having dyspnea, but dyspnea is not the only source. There is the change in breathing patterns. One of the works that's coming out a lot from Mumbai right now, especially from KM, is they're trying to look at when people are at moderate or in oxygen dependent or have been on non-invasive ventilation and they have a hyperinflated lung. Are you as physical therapist, when you assess a patient, even observing to see, is there a hyperinflation of the chest wall? Are you looking at a diaphragm fatigue, which is also present in this patient? Are these things contributing to a not so effectively working respiratory system, and can that also lead to an O2 desaturation? So these are evolving issues that are coming out, and definitely there is reduced functional mobility. And some of this work was out from China very early in 2019, as these are some of the very common functional limitations that you might see in an individual in a post-COVID season. This is a work that's come out very recently from Europe, from the European Respiratory Society, and now in 2020, it's available in public domain. If you really want to assess a person's functional status, there is a scale which is called the functional assessment scale for a patient. And I know this is a busy slide, and this is the scale that comes out grading a person between grade 0 to grade 4. Grade 4 is a person who's got severe functional limitation. Your assessment, your intervention, your exercise program will be very different for a person in grade 4 versus a person in grade 0. So here's some things that they have said. For example, can you live without any assistance from another person post-COVID? If your answer is yes, then you go down this scale. Obviously, if your answer is no, that means for many of your personal activities like walking, like eating, like toilet, all your ADLs, if you feel you cannot function, you're straight away looked into as grade 4 with severe limitation. And people with 0 limitations would be that they don't suffer from symptoms, from pain, or from any of the mental issues, you're going to get grade 0. Most of our patients tend to be between grade 1, grade 2, and some of them in grade 3. So when they're not able to do a reasonable activity on their own, or they have a residue left over, so you can't have a one shoe fit all exercise program that you will put down for every post-COVID care person who comes to rehabilitation or to visit a physical therapy department. So assessment becomes very critical. This is self-reported, and therefore it is what the patient tells you, which needs to be taken into account with all the other objective assessments. According for me as a physical therapy practitioner in clinical assessment, 2 pieces of equipment that all of us in physical therapy practice must have is assessment tools that will help us to measure the vitals, a pulse oximeter that you will use for all the assessments that you do, and definitely documentation, whether you use an app-based documentation or you have documentation that you've developed for a post-COVID assessment. And this is so critical because as we go further, you'll see it decides the pathway that you will use for the kind of exercise you would like in this patient to be done. Some of the outcome measures that people can use for fatigue. Again, it's something I'm just showing you a very simplistic one, like a fatigue numeric rating scale, and it has a scale of 0 to 10, like a VAS scale. And based on that, the person can tell you that even doing routine activity or a slightly higher intensity activity where their fatigue levels is. Why is it critical? Because when people present with a fatigue of more than 3 or 4 on 10, and some as high as 7 and 8, what the recent literature which has come out from the world body, which is the World Physiotherapy, and they've come out with safe rehabilitation protocols. These are individuals that you cannot give a continuous exercise program. The suggestion is it is stop, rest, pace, and that's the jargon that is used, which means pacing is a very critical component in individual where fatigue is an issue in their day-to-day life. You need to pace physical activity or exercise such that you allow the individual to settle down before they move to the next activity. So in an outcome measure for strength, why do we need to measure strength? Because there is a loss of muscle mass either due to the inflammatory process or due to inactivity, but definitely there is a loss in muscle mass, and therefore we need to measure muscle strength. Uh, One of the most commonly used ones is you don't do individual muscle testing, but you do gross strength. Only when you feel very strong variations, then you move to specific areas. So most often the one that we use and it's recommended in literature is grip strength is a measure that is used to give you a gross measure of an upper limb strength. It's been ratified by many assessment strength guidelines. A simple 30-second sit to stand test gives you a very quick measure of the strength of the large muscles of the lower limb, and it helps you to look for what you would like to look at in general. To give you an example, I've just taken a female who was 75 years old, and we use a very simple tool of grip strength. And then so we look at the start position, the end position. In her case, she had a good grip strength at 13 kgs, I'm sorry. Normative for her age, she's 70 to 80, is normative is around 11. So obviously for her, the upper limb didn't seem to be so compromised. When you want to look at endurance or functional capacity, you can use, when you take a sit to stand test and use for a whole minute, you need to use a pulse oximeter to see how this simple exercise of sit to stand from a chair does for desaturation in an individual. So when we looked at, for example, the same patient of ours, it's a very simple thing. The most important is you have to have an armless chair. I've got a pulse oximeter onto her finger. She's getting the explanations of what I want her to do. And then I just get her to do a 1 minute sit to stand and back. The reason I don't have the arms is because I don't want her to take the support. I want her to cross her arms on the chest and come on an up and down sit to stand, because that gives me a measure of what she can do. I put down the parameters of what I found in saturation before she started the test, what was her pulse rate at the time, and by the time she finished the minute, her saturation had dropped to 95, her pulse rate had gone up by 10, and the number of repetitions she did was 9. And those repetitions are slightly less than normative, and I will share the normative with you in a minute. Another way of looking at an outcome measure, if you're looking for endurance, is looking at a 6-minute walk test, like you can see what we do in our department. We always have the person wearing a pulse oximeter. We also have their vitals being measured constantly throughout the 6 minutes. It's very critical to look how the respiratory system is behaving and how the desaturation, if any, is occurring, because it starts telling you a story that you need to keep cognizance of before you plan an exercise program. So when I look at our example of this lady who was 75-year-old, she had a grip strength of 13, normative is 11. So for me, her upper limb is reasonably okay. We looked at functional mobility in terms of making her walk a certain distance, and we found that her L test in functional mobility was around 21 seconds, and the normative has to be less than 27. So for me, basic functional mobility in this lady seemed okay. Her saturation was dropping only from 97 to 95. The benchmark that literature says and that we use in our department is any saturation greater than 3% from the resting is a reason that we would refer back to our physicians for a discussion. As we are seeing a drop of more than 3%, it's not very safe till you know what's going wrong for you to put an exercise program. What I noticed with her, in a sit to stand in 1 minute, she did 9 reps for 1 minute, and the normative is in and around the range of 18. So what is it telling me? Two things. Number one, lady got compromised in the large muscles of her lower limb. She probably had involvement of a muscle mass wasting of the lower limbs. She also had endurance because it was a full 1 minute sit to stand. So both of these seem to be compromised. I already know in my base assessment what is this lady going to require in terms of rehabilitation. And hence I keep saying there is no one shoe that fits all in an exercise program that you will plan for a post-COVID care patient. So you need to understand that in a post-COVID situation, all of these three are interconnected: strength, endurance, and mobility. And unless you measure all three of them, either many times you have one or more item affected, sometimes you may have all three. So your planning will really depend on what are the gaps or the deficiencies that you are seeing in the post-COVID era. So to share with you our own experience of our post-COVID, post-rehab or post-COVID care recovery, we put out this document thing, and then entire team consisted of the physician, the pulmonologist, the cardiologist, the neurologist, the psychiatrist. We had pediatricians because there could be children, and you had physical therapy and rehab and nutrition. We commenced our services of post-COVID at the end of the first wave on the 7th of September 2020, and we to date run it 3 times a week. More than 1,400 and odd patients as on today have been seen, more than 2,500 consultations, and over 800 of them have been assessed for physical therapy and rehabilitation requirements and needs. So the share or the take home I'm saying is that these are all the systems that can get affected. So it is not about only the pulmonary system. There could be multiple systems that are affected. And unless you do a 360-degree assessment, you're really not going to be able to put the track in place. Here's the team that consists of our physician led by Dr. Vijayashree, and we have the neurologist, we have the nurse, we have the pulmonologist, we have the physical therapy team that came in, that put together this whole thing as a post-COVID care and rehabilitation as early as September 2020. One of the things that we did, and one of the things that most people should do, is try to look at a clinical care pathway for post-COVID care and rehabilitation. So when you set it up, you definitely need more than one person working with you. And in our setup, every patient who comes in for a post-COVID, for example, is first screened for eligibility to come to the post-COVID clinic, because we have some guidelines as to how early can they come into a post-COVID care. They are primarily, first and foremost, assessed by the physician, and then based on what the physician looks at the comprehensive assessment, they are either, if it's a respiratory, you may have a pulmonologist. If there's a cardiac, you have the cardiologist, the neurologist, the psychiatrist. Along with the physician, where an informed consent and data usage is done, every patient undergoes an assessment from a physical therapy for evaluation of their functional status and endurance. If the functional status is compromised and impaired, they are counseled for rehabilitation. The whole assessment goes back to the physician to look at a review of what happens. Any person who comes for a at the triage needs to be at least 21 days from the date of the first symptom for us to assess them. So we created this clinical care pathway very early. So we were all very clear as a team what we were working with. And the team met several times to come out with protocols, guidelines, and strengths and limitations to see where we wanted to take post-COVID care going forward. In the post-COVID clinic, at a recent point in time when we looked at it, we said we had over 2,500. We've done more than 809. What are some of the key findings that we found in our physical therapy assessment? Literally, strength is one of the things that is a deficit that we didn't realize to what extent till we started assessing the strength from day one in post-COVID. Functional capacity, over 40% of them had altered functional capacity in the 6-minute walk test that showed us that they definitely had. 6-minute walk test for us threw up two kinds of issues. Number one, there was a group of people who had desaturation at the end of 6 minutes, and there were other groups of people who had a resting heart rate which was already lightly higher, and it really went reasonably high. And at the end of the 1 minute of recovery, they didn't well come down. So really, am I challenging the respiratory system? Am I seeing some issues in the cardiac systems? These are things that make me send the patient back in discussion that we do with our clinician. This also gives us an idea, are we going down the road of pulmonary rehab? Are we going down the road of cardiac rehab? So some very basic, simple assessments are critical if you want to take a pathway of knowing where do you go in COVID care. So some of the guidelines to the assessments that we tend to use are, we definitely measure the resting vitals, but then after every assessment, we re-look at our vitals, especially after a 6-minute walk or the endurance test. We want to see immediately after, how is the respiratory system behaving? How is the cardiac system behaving? And we try to do it after 1 minute. It tells us a story of how to plan my treatment strategies. We measure strength with a 30-second sit to stand. It gives us a gross value of lower limb strength. We do a grip strength that gives us a gross value of upper limb strength. We also look at all the ADL functions that a person takes up to see, are these compromised? And obviously, if there are neurological deficits, the physician definitely refers them to a neurologist, and they may come back to us for a neuro rehab for some of these cases. So these are the guidelines that we use in a post-COVID care physiotherapy assessment. And here's the busy slide, but I really would like us to look at it for a bit to say, what is the decision-making algorithm that we use for deciding what shall I do in treatment? If I have an impaired 6-minute walk test, if I don't have it, the patient's fine for as far as endurance is concerned. If I have an impaired thing, then I'm talking, do I look at the possibility of pulmonary rehabilitation? If the pulmonary rehabilitation may look at breathing, may look at an aerobic training with rate of perceived exertion as a primary indicator, I may take a combination of isometric, isotonic, I can do strengthening, I do work conditioning and hardening. If I have an impaired heart rate that I'm seeing, and after discussion with the clinician team, if there is a cardiac heart system, the possibility that I want to make it a cardiopulmonary rehabilitation rather than just a pulmonary rehabilitation. And in these, we may want to put in cardiac rehab at a monitored level, preferably with telemonitoring or with the monitoring that I'm using. If I'm seeing an impaired impaired strength, then whereas the other 3 areas seem reasonably well within my 6-minute and all other assessments, I'm looking at what I call a functional rehabilitation. In functional rehabilitation, I would look at function, I would look at balanced retraining, I'd look at strength retraining, I would like to do aerobic training for them, monitoring their heart rate and other vitals as a primary. So this is one of the post-COVID rehab, I call it the decision-making algorithm, that we developed it as a team to see, based on our assessment, where will the person benefit the most in terms of what areas of rehabilitation. In this year, June 2021, the World Physiotherapy has come out with a very lovely briefing paper 9. It talks of safe rehabilitation approaches for people who are living with long COVID. What is the amount of physical activity will you recommend? What kind of exercises you will recommend? And it's available freely right now on the WCBD website. And I recommend that all of you must download this and have a look at it for those who are involved in post-COVID rehab. They have given 4 key home messages based on an experience that they have done of 125 countries around the world. And this document is extremely comprehensive. They say that there is a lot of patients who fall into the category of what is called post-exertional symptom exasperation. These are people, if you put them in a reasonably higher level of exercise, or if you put them into a more physical activity than what recovery has allowed them to do, what you will notice is within a few hours, they develop an exasperation of their symptoms. It could be a desaturation, it could be a breathing pattern alteration, or a severe fatigue. So these are the category of people whom you will need to look at, or you will need them to report it back to you, because they are people in whom you may want to recommend pacing as an exercise. They exercise at a certain intensity, and then they take a gap, and then they exercise or do activity at a certain intensity. What the document also says is, and very interesting and a very new concept that is coming in pacing also, there is something in exercise called a quota pacing and a symptom pacing. Meaning when you start exercising, you exercise at a certain intensity, but you follow up with your patient to see any symptoms coming in. If no, that's the intensity of exercise you'll do in quota, and then you'll go to the next level of intensity. You cannot jack up intensity of exercise very frequently without assessment feedback. And there's a very beautiful section within this document that has come out, which is known as a DePaul's functional exasperation assessment. It looks at intensity of exercise, frequency of exercise, and it's a subjective tool that will give you a lot of information. If you have a cardiac impairment where obviously the resting heart rate itself is very high, and if you did try to do a simple 6-minute and you're seeing thing, this is a person that needs to go back to your physician and the cardiology assessment. One needs to know where this is coming from, and once that's cleared, that's when you will put in a physical activity exercise intensity. Exertional desaturation is when they desaturate more than 3% on the resting saturation, that you want to go more into a pulmonary exercise retraining, breathing pattern retraining before you incorporate other level. Autonomic dysfunction or orthostatic intolerance, you may see hypo or hypertension. The ones who are with hypo, there are hypertension, because these are areas that you should be concerned about. You may have vestibular issues also. And what this document recommends is, these are the people who have, if you have autonomic dysfunction and a hypertension, you must look at using a lot of isometric exercises in non-upright positions. You must try to use a lot of other strategies to see if you can work with the autonomic nervous system dysfunction. So really, this is an excellent, I would say, manual that is worth keeping as part of your treatment strategies. So if you're monitoring patients, it could be working with your patients at your clinics or even at home. Critical in a post-COVID season is, without measuring vitals, without observing them all the time, without using a pulse oximetry, you're not going to be very safe. If you're working with people at home, or if you're doing tele-rehabilitation, it's usually recommended that, because you're not right there, they should have some wearable devices that they wear that you can see the monitoring. You need to use rate of perceived exertion as one outcome to measure the exertion, for you to know when to stop the exercise, because you're not necessarily physically there if you're doing tele-rehab. And even if you're there, RPE is a good tool along with pulse oximetry. So the question that comes in for all of these people, looking at what our assessments have thrown up to us, that there are compromises in strength, there are compromises in endurance, there's a compromise sometimes in mobility. So is there a role of exercise in the post-COVID care? Is there a need? There definitely is a need based on what literature is saying and what we ourselves, many of us, seeing with our patients. Is it beneficial? Because for many of us who worked with patients in the post-COVID rehab, we definitely have data that tells us that functional rehab, pulmonary rehab, cardiorespiratory have brought in better outcomes in a number of our patients. So what is the type of exercise? How safe is it? And what precaution? Precautions is you need to measure, and you can't go away from it. You need to measure saturation, you need to measure their vitals, you need to know how their cardiac system is behaving, you need to know how your respiratory system is behaving to know whether you're overdoing the exercise or whether it's appropriate for that individual with impairments. There's a very useful book that came out of Johns Hopkins, which says Bouncing Back from COVID-19. It is a guide to restore exercise and movement and function. Again, it's freely available, and it will be a useful tool that people can refer to when trying to understand what kind of exercise, what kind of movement, and how far should I go. So how do I decide? I say the simple answer is a solid, well done assessment is really the direction that will give you where you need to intervene. Would you want to intervene in strength training, whether you want to do functional, whether you want to do endurance, pulmonary or cardiac rehab, or is it going to be a combination of both? So your assessment holds the key to what you wish to do. A poor assessment will not give you adequate pathway of where you want to go in clinical practice. Treatment strategies. The one message or the simplest thing that I want to say is there is no cookie cutter for all the menu. What I'm trying to say here is there is no menu card on exercise protocol for post-COVID rehabilitation. No two patients will present in a similar way to you. They will present in combinations or different. It would be extremely unjust to try to take a set of exercises that you have decided to put together and deliver it to every patient that walks into your workplace for rehab. A sedentary person will behave quite differently from deconditioned people, or people who are moderate and severe coming out of a post-COVID will definitely behave differently. Therefore, in many of these three kind of category, if you're not very sure what to do, you must start low. The caution that I always have is if you see a saturation drop of more than 3, be very careful with the kind and intensity of exercise you're doing. Either it's a bit too much at this point in time, the physical activity that you have prescribed may be a bit more at this point in time, and therefore you need to revisit your strategies. If you have a person whose resting heart rate is already high and if they are at a resting heart rate about 110 at rest, I be very careful about the amount of exercise that you're going to do, and post-exercise heart rate going up rather high and not dropping back close to resting after 1 minute are reasons to pull back on your intensity of exercise that you're doing for these patients. There are 5 layers of human movement according to the Johns Hopkins book on bouncing back. They say that when you're talking in layers of exercise that you want to bring in, obviously it's a breathe deep because of the lungs. You can have an autonomic nervous system dysfunction. So it says turn on the vestibular system. So if you have assessed the person well and you're looking at the dysfunction that's coming from an autonomic system, you may then turn that on. You may want to engage in patterns as they start to improve, because it's called the cross-body movement, which is good for functional mobility. And then you build strength because you want to increase strength. And obviously you're going to gain or increased tolerance. So these are considered the 5 layers of human movement that from a physical therapy domain, because we would like to look at ourselves to say that exercise science is an area of our domain. Endurance training, the choices are yours. You may start something as simple in terms of walking, but what kind of advice you give, how do they monitor themselves, how you want to progress into stair climbing. If it's in a clinic or a center, do you want to use the bicycle? Do you want to use the treadmill? Are there other comorbidities that you want to think of? Again, monitor the individual. There is no replacement for safe rehabilitation. So the take-home message at the end of my talk is there a need for rehabilitation? I don't think it needs to be emphasized. The need is very high. You need to understand the deficits that the person in front of you has presented with, and you need to work in a team that gives you a 360-degree view of those individual patients. You need to drop assessments in physical therapy, which is very relevant to the impairment that the person is presenting with, and you can only make a specific exercise plan for every individual, and there is no menu to what you should be doing. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Rupasri, you can take over the question answer session.
Thank you, Mahendra sir. A very good afternoon to one and all. And thank you very much, Dr. Savita Ravindra, for giving a presentation on post-COVID-19 care, a physiotherapy perspective. So with your permission, I would like to take some of the questions in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am.
The question is from Chippy VM. What are the types of psychological problems which can be developed in post-COVID patients, and how to manage it? I don't know if it's related to this topic.
I can only, I can tell you what is the practice that is at the post-COVID center at Ramaiah. We have a psychiatrist on our team, and therefore all patients who do present, and when they are assessed and they present with sleep, some of them present with very severe sleep disturbances, some of them have anxiety, then this is captured in our assessments that the physician does. Some of them do have depressions, and therefore all of these, when people present with this, they are referred and they do undergo psychiatric counseling, and strategies are planned for them. And so therefore I say to you that it is a 360-degree assessment that's critical.
Right. Do we have any hand raise option? It is for the information of the participants. If you have any queries, you can directly get it clarified with our expert by asking directly. You can use the hand raise option if you want. Do we have any hand raise options?
No, madam.
Okay. So here a question is from Deepmala. She wants to know, is there any protocol to be followed in patient? But actually, as in your lecture, you told it cannot be a uniform, but is there any general protocol then later which can be like customized?
I do not, as I said in my presentation, that your assessment will drive the direction in which you will put out an exercise plan or a program for a particular patient. You can't have somebody come in at the moment when you see them and you talk to them, you really don't know whether they have issues in strength, whether they have issues in endurance, whether they have other problems like, is it a pulmonary problem? So I think your assessment will drive the protocol that you want to use for rehabilitation.
Right. So here a question from Gajanan Kamath. Is proning beneficial for COVID patients?
I mean, in an acute care work that we do in the COVID wards, which all of my team, my staff, my faculty, my postgraduates are in post-COVID acute care in the wards. They use extensively proning. We do even after they get discharged from hospital. Some of them do get admitted as inpatient, where rehab is done, and because they're still dependent on oxygen. We may use strategies like proning, but in post-COVID walk-in patients who come to the clinic who are not on oxygen, unless we have particular reason to believe that this person is, we don't tend to use proning as a strategy, but in acute care, definitely.
Right, ma'am, right. Gautam, please allow the person to ask the question with the hand raised.
Yes, madam.
Hello.
Yes, go
Am I
ahead.
audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask, like, what is the normative value for a 30-second sit to stand test, ma'am? You said the 1 minute sit to stand test was 18. If we're doing a 30-second, what would be the normative?
You know, the normative values will vary from every decade. The normative values for India are very much existing in the literature, and it's easily available. And I can't off the head remember. When I said 18, again, 18 was for the age group of 70 to 80. When I looked at the sit to stand, there are two issues for me here. The 30-second sit to stand we use as a measure of strength for lower limb. But the 1 minute sit to stand can be used as endurance in case your clinic, you may not be able to do a 6-minute walk test for whatever reason. So we use that as an alternative for endurance. And there is enough Indian normative values, and it's for every decade going from 20 to 30, from up to 70 to 80. So it's available in public domain. So I could probably find some way of sharing it with you, but at the top of my head, I cannot tell you every decade.
Right, right. So we have Mr. Sandeep Dhar. You can ask your question, sir. Yes, go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity to ask the question. Ma'am, I just wanted to ask, is there any discharge criteria from rehab, or does it also depend on the assessment and the outcome that we get as we progress with the protocol of, as we progress with the rehab protocol?
I can tell you what we've been doing at practice. Normally, we have a minimum of, we request people, depending again also on the, you know, the multiple dysfunctions that are there versus a single dysfunction. So we usually start with a 2-week program, and then and multiply it by every 2 weeks. So sometimes people with having only a strength issue and all other areas are fine, they go through for a 2-week program, and we put them back into a home program, and then maybe they will follow up with us once in a week or whatever later on. But somebody who have a cardiopulmonary may require a longer time. So we take it in blocks of 2 weeks. So we may do 2 weeks, and then they extend it by another 2 weeks. So that's how. And our outcomes are, we reassess them for the same dysfunctions that they had when they first came into the program. And if we see a change to near normal on those outcomes, we're willing to discharge them with leaving them with a home program for themselves. So there is no fixed thing that, you know, every person will take 2 weeks and then go home. There is no fixed like that. It depends individual to individual.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Okay. A question is, how could we assist patients with Parkinson's during post-COVID? And for how long we need to do that? Is there any particular period?
I don't think you can define any particular period. And I do know that we had patients with acute, people who were admitted in the wards with Parkinson's. And yes, they do come for a follow-up. So again, obviously, there is a neurological deficit that is going with, along with the maybe an impairment with something else. So then the neuro rehab team will work with this patient or in combination with respiratory or a cardiac dysfunction. So and usually these people will also be assessed by the neurologist. So it's a strategy that the team will put together and then work ahead. Yeah, we may have more difficulties in getting them out. They may end up coming in a more longer period than some of the others who do not have a neurological deficit.
Right, right. So here is a question from Pooja. So she says some patients do suffer from stroke post-COVID.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is the rehabilitation protocol is similar to that of stroke in non-COVID patients?
Yes. But then, since they have coming post-COVID, it doesn't take away for you to not measure their vitals in terms of the oxygen saturation while you're exercising them for the neuro rehab or looking at the autonomic nervous system getting altered. So some of these things that we would do for all post-COVID patients will also need to be monitored while you are managing them like in pre-COVID stroke case. So the neuro rehab team would work on them, but these parameters are critical because at the end of the day, you're still exercising them. You're still giving them exercise or the rehab, and you need to know how the cardiorespiratory system is behaving with these exercises.
Right. So a question from Ankur Guha. If the patient is on oxygen support, how one can assess through the protocol and taper the oxygen support?
A lot of our patients who do get discharged with oxygen, we do at our center, we do what is known as a tele rehab, because some of them may not be able to come to the center. Many of these patients also do opt to get admitted, and they get admitted with the pulmonologist, and we work on them. And a lot of people who are oxygen dependent, a lot of times it is because of deconditioning and remaining on oxygen for long periods of time, that when they get into functional activities or when they get into physical activities, like you want them to ambulate or like you want them to move around the house, then this person's periphery requires oxygen in addition to which the lung systems or the pulmonary system requires oxygen. And therefore what we tend to do is that we start getting them to gradually start exercising, and many times we might do something as simple as a sit to stand exercise, and we do what is called pacing, where we make them do short bursts of exercise more frequently, then ambulate them shorter distances. We allow we put a safety net for ourselves, that some of these patients, we as a department of physiotherapy, we've come out with our own protocols that if a person is on XYZ liters of oxygen, and if let us say their resting oxygen is saturation is at 95 with oxygen, how much is it safe for us to make them do exercise? And we may take a choice that as a team that we will be willing to let them come down till 85 as a cutoff. And if we see them dropping below that, we would immediately stop the exercise. But what we've observed with time is we watch them, we wait till their saturation goes back to 95 before we allow them to rest, and we step out from where we are with them. What our observation from what most of our colleagues have put down in documentation is when you do pacing as an exercise protocol, the person's ability to do that intensity of activity without the oxygen saturation dropping that much becomes better with each passing day. And then in conjunction with the pulmonologist, and most often many of our team members would do rounds with the pulmonologist. We come to standard decision making if the patient is an inpatient or in tele rehab. And our observation is we've been able to get patients down to the oxygen requirements for them, and some of them did not need oxygen at discharge. So we've seen both combinations of people, but it's a long road and you need to use a lot of pacing to get to where you want in exercise.
Okay. So do we have any hand raise options, Gautam?
No, madam.
Okay. I'll continue with the chat box. So Dr. Gladson, he wants to know what are the risk factors for physiotherapists while handling COVID patients, and which precautions they should probably take.
I think the ones where today's talk is mostly essentially about post-COVID care, and mostly post-COVID care so again, I call that triage that we practiced for a visit to, for people who can come for post-COVID assessment to be seen by the team. Normally, if it is a person in home isolation, the SOP that has been written down for us at Ramaiah, where the team has put that SOP together, is the person can come only after day 17 from the day of testing positive if they were in home isolation, and if they were at a person who was admitted to a hospital, then from the date of discharge, a minimum of 14 days after which they can come for the post-COVID clinic and center. So obviously, by putting this these guidelines into place, I don't think they are at a point of being, at a transmissionable point. The patients who are coming out of COVID, and other than the standard protocols that we follow, that we wear an N95 mask and we sanitize our hands and we see the patients, we may use a level 2 PPE in the beginnings, in the wave 1. After all of us have been vaccinated, I don't think we so much use the level 2, but we may use a face shield while we are working with these patients at close quarters. But even that, we are now mostly in face masks, and we take our due precautions of sanitization. But other than that, I think at post-COVID care, if you put your triage visits very carefully, you are quite safe.
Right. So here is a question from Tejashri Rajhans. Is there a separate and accelerated protocol for athletes and individuals who already have high cardiovascular endurance and are fit?
I'm not very sure that would apply in the post-COVID, and I think many of us have recently read in the newspaper that there was one of the very senior executives from Indigo who is in his late 30s or early 40s and extremely fit person, and he was in the category of a mild COVID and went back to exercise of cycling very early and died of a cardiac arrest on the cycling track. So I don't want to generalize at this point in time, also because we don't have enough data, that just because I'm an athlete and I have been a very fit cardiovascular system pre-COVID, that I can be so in post-COVID. Unless you assess this person, unless you've looked at the way the cardiorespiratory system behaves at your assessment, you should not take a pre-COVID value as a criteria for planning post-COVID return to activity of sport very easily.
Right.
At our center, usually, even if they are a mild and in home isolation, if you are an athlete, they are recommended by the team before 6 to 8 weeks, don't attempt to go back to that particular sport.
Right. Okay. So a question from Mr. Balaji. How long we need to do proning position if the saturation is under 85, and is there any duration which probably can tell us what will be the duration to get back to the normal?
I think that one is proning, to me a lot is practiced in the acute care wards, and then usually there are centers that usually use this across the ward. Sometimes they may ask all patients to do a proning if you're in a general ward, if you're on oxygen, or if you're even otherwise, because then you really encourage better saturations. It could be as low as first, if somebody cannot tolerate it, then you're going to go into the side lie positions. That is the first thing, because there are some people who are not comfortable if they're breathless, or they have other issues, who are not comfortable. Those who are comfortable in proning, then there could be as low as 15 minutes. It can go as much as 30 minutes. So it depends on what the SOP of the place or the center, based on what they have put together in literature and evidence, that they will take up for themselves.
Right. So in chat box, we have some queries related to black fungus, management of diabetes, etc. I would like to inform the participants that many of the programs are covered with regard to management of COVID in all these aspects. The material is available in RGHS websites, official YouTube. You can refer that for your information. And here we would take up the questions related to today's talk. And a question from Anushka. What can we recommend to a 55-year-old patient who had undergone COVID, who was COVID positive, along with pneumonia, and also is with oxygen supply, but now recovered from COVID?
Not sure what this person is asking for. What can we advise?
Yeah. A 55-year-old patient who was COVID positive along with pneumonia, and also discharged with oxygen therapy.
Most often at our center, when patients from our hospitals get discharged, as part of the discharge summary, there is one sentence giving them a timeline where it is recommended that they visit a post-COVID care clinic, because after recovery, unless you come to visit a center or where you could have one last assessment to see whether all of your parameters are within acceptable range from the clinicians, and that's the opportunity that we use to look at the people who have got any functional limitations. And so post-COVID, if you're discharged from the hospital, one is if you had pneumonia, and two, if you were on oxygen, you definitely need to go to a post-COVID care environment where you want to make sure, have I recovered well, and can I go back to a lot of the routine that I'm doing? That would be, I would say, my suggestion.
Right. So do we have any hand raise options? Just checking.
No, madam, no.
No. Okay. So here is a question from Mercy. Is there any rehabilitation protocol for postnatal patients? Postnatal, after childbirth. Postnatal COVID patients. After childbirth.
They tested positive after childbirth, or they were COVID positive and they postnatal?
Depends on that. Yeah.
I don't remember us getting postnatal patients who came for post-COVID
You're right.
at rehab at this point in time. But yes, we have a team within who are subject experts of women's health, and maybe you could reach out to us and I can ask them to answer in physical therapy that did they encounter something like this. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't remember, but I could be wrong. I don't know that it could be very different unless they do an assessment to them. For me, the bottom line is, irrespective whether you have a neurological deficit and all of this, you may treat all of those things, but COVID behaves differently. And so it brings in different compromises in terms of, I would say, fatigue, strength, endurance, and this commonly will have to be assessed for most patients, irrespective of their other comorbidities or other health issues.
Right. And thank you very much for answering all our questions. Over to you, Dayanand sir.
Dr. Dayanand? Dr. Dayanand?
Yes. Mahendra. Okay. Yes, good evening to one and all. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor and Registrar, I take this opportunity to thank the today's speaker, Dr. Savitha Ravindra, the Professor and Head, Department of Physiotherapy, MS Ramaiah Medical College, for an excellent presentation, and she has made understand the post-COVID-19 care perspective with respect to physiotherapy. And also, she answered all the questions of the participants who have raised their questions. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor and Registrar, we thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you.
And then we thank the ECHO India, who is collaborating with this training program. On behalf of the ECHO India, we thank the Gautam for his constant cooperation with this teaching program. And then we thank all the officers of the University, Rajiv Gandhi University, Dr. B.J. Mahendra, Dr. Rupashri, and Kirti Somshekar for their constant participation in the program. And we thank all the participants who have participated in the program, and we thank one and all. Thank you.
Dr. Dayanand, also please
Ah.
give information on Friday's program.
Friday's program.
Sir, it is hosted.
Tell me, Dr. Rupashri.
Okay. Thank you for
Tell.
thank you, Mahendra sir. Thank you.
Hmm.
So on Friday, 25th June, at 3 p.m., we have a presentation on role of masking in minimizing the impact of third wave of COVID-19 by Dr. Shashi Bhushan, Professor and HOD, Department of Pulmonary Medicine, Bangalore Medical College and Research Institute, Bangalore. So I request all to make use of this session, and please do log in and for this session. And also to the information of all the participants, today's talk will be hosted in RGHS website, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Please make use of this information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gautam, you can close the meeting, please.
Okay.